Samuel Thornton hadn't touched his wife's Bible in 3 years. But when he found the Apache woman bleeding on his land, clutching a piece of hide like it was worth more than her own life, his hands reached for it without thinking.
"Let me die," she whispered. "They will kill you too."
Sam looked at the bullet wound in her side, then at the dust cloud rising from the east. Riders were coming. He had maybe 10 minutes to decide walk away, and live or carry her inside, and declare war on the most powerful man in Wyoming. He chose war. My friends, before we continue, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel and follow this story to the very end. Leave a comment below telling me which city you're watching from. I love knowing how far these tales of the Old West have traveled. Now let's ride on. The first bullet had torn through her side 2 days ago. Winter Moon knew she was dying. She could feel it in the way her blood had slowed from a river to a trickle, in the way her horse had finally collapsed beneath her, and in the way the sky above seemed to stretch further and further away with each breath she took. But she kept crawling. Her fingers dug into the Wyoming dirt, pulling her body forward inch by inch. The piece of hide pressed against her chest, the map her father had died protecting the map her husband had been murdered for, the map that held the future of her people in its faded lines. She would not let them have it. "Just a little further," she whispered to herself. Her mother's language first, then her father's English. Both felt foreign on her cracked lips. "Just a little further." The ranch house appeared through her blurred vision like a mirage. A small structure, weathered but standing. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone lived there. Someone who would either save her or turn her over to the men hunting her. Winter Moon dragged herself the last 20 feet and collapsed against the wooden fence post. Her hand found the latch of the gate, but she had no strength left to lift it. So she waited to die. Samuel Thornton heard the thump against his fence while he was cleaning his late wife's rifle. He set down the weapon, slowly listening. Could be a coyote. Could be nothing. But something in his gut, that old instinct he'd tried to bury along with his marshal's badge, told him to check. He grabbed his hat and stepped onto the porch. At first he thought it was a bundle of rags someone had dumped. Then the bundle moved and he saw the blood-soaked buckskin, the dark hair matted with dirt, and the face of a woman looking up at him with eyes that expected nothing but death. "Good Lord," Sam breathed. He was down the steps before he could think, his boots hitting the hard ground as he ran to the gate. Up close, she looked even worse. Bullet wound in her side, at least 2 days old from the look of the infection setting in. Cuts and bruises covering her arms. And those eyes, amber-colored, striking, watching him with the wariness of a wounded animal. "Miss, can you hear me?" She flinched when he reached for her. "Easy now. I ain't gonna hurt you." "Let me die." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the words hit him like a punch. "They will kill you too." Sam looked at the wound, then back at her face. Apache from the looks of her dress and beadwork. Maybe Chiricahua, though he wasn't certain. What he was certain of was that she wouldn't last another hour without help. "Who did this to you?" She didn't answer. Her hand clutched something against her chest, a piece of hide, he realized. She was protecting it, even as her life bled out. "Miss, I need to get you inside. That wound needs tending." "No." She tried to push him away, but her arms had no strength. "If they find me here, you don't understand. Then help me understand." For a long moment, she just stared at him. Sam felt like he was being measured, weighed, judged by something older than either of them. Then her eyes flickered to the dust cloud rising in the east, and her face went pale. "Too late," she said. "They're already here." Sam turned to look. 5 riders, maybe 6, coming fast. He had maybe 10 minutes before they reached his ranch. He looked back at the woman, then at his house, then at the riders again. His wife would have known what to do. Margaret had always been the one with the clear moral compass, the one who could see right and wrong without squinting. But Margaret was 3 years dead, along with the son she'd tried to give him, and Sam had been stumbling through the darkness ever since. "Can you stand?" I said, "Let me." "I heard what you said." Sam bent down and slipped his arms beneath her, lifting her as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing. "But I ain't in the habit of letting people die on my property. Bad for the soil." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cry of pain. Either way, she stopped fighting him. Sam carried her through the gate, across the yard, and up the porch steps. He shouldered open the door and laid her on the table in the main room, the same table where Margaret used to serve Sunday dinner, back when Sundays meant something. "Stay here, and stay quiet." He grabbed a blanket from the bedroom and covered her, hiding the blood-stained buckskin. Then he pulled his rifle from the wall and stepped back onto the porch, just as the riders crested the hill. Judge Cornelius Whitmore rode at the front of the group. Sam recognized him immediately, the silver hair, the black coat, the way he sat his horse like he owned everything his eyes touched, which in this part of Wyoming he pretty much did. Behind him rode 4 men Sam didn't recognize. Hard faces, guns at their hips. The kind of men who followed orders without asking questions. "Samuel," Whitmore called out as they approached. His voice was warm, friendly even. "It's been too long." "Judge." Sam didn't step down from the porch. "What brings you out this way?" Whitmore stopped his horse at the edge of Sam's yard, just outside the fence. Respectful, like they were still friends. Like he still came by for whiskey and chess games the way he had when Margaret was alive. "Hunting a fugitive," Whitmore said. "Apache woman. Killed 2 of my men and stole something valuable. Trail led this direction." Sam felt the weight of the rifle in his hands. "That's so. You haven't seen anything, have you? Bloodstains, maybe? Tracks heading through your land?" The lie came easier than Sam expected. "Nothing unusual. Been mending fences all morning." Whitmore studied him for a long moment. Those eyes, pale blue, almost colorless, had always unsettled Sam. They were the eyes of a man who could send another man to hang and sleep soundly that same night. "Mind if we search your property just to be thorough?" "I do mind, actually." One of Whitmore's men shifted in his saddle. The others exchanged glances. Whitmore himself just smiled. "Samuel, I understand you've been struggling since Margaret passed. God rest her soul. But surely you understand I'm only trying to do my duty as an officer of the court. Your duty doesn't extend to searching a man's home without cause. You taught me that yourself back when I still wore a badge." The smile faded slightly. "The badge you abandoned. The badge I set aside. There's a difference." Whitmore leaned forward in his saddle, and for just a moment, Sam saw something beneath the polished exterior, something cold and calculating. "The woman I'm looking for is dangerous, Samuel. She's killed before, and she'll kill again. If you're protecting her..." "I told you I haven't seen anyone." "You're making yourself an enemy of this territory." Sam felt his finger tighten on the trigger guard. Not enough to fire, not yet. Just enough to remind himself it was there. "Cornelius, I've known you for 15 years. I stood beside you when they laid my wife in the ground. So I'm gonna tell you this once as a friend." He took a breath. "Get off my land." The silence stretched between them like a rope being pulled taut. One of the men behind Whitmore reached for his gun, but the judge raised a hand to stop him. "All right, Samuel, all right." Whitmore gathered his reins. "I respect your property rights, always have. But if I find out you're hiding her..." "You won't, because I'm not." Whitmore held his gaze for a long moment. Then he tipped his hat, a gesture that looked more like a threat than a courtesy, and turned his horse. "Let's go," he said to his men. "We'll check the north trail." Sam watched them ride away. His rifle still raised, his heart pounding against his ribs. He didn't lower the weapon until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he went inside to face the woman whose life he'd just claimed as his own responsibility. She was trying to sit up when he walked through the door. "Don't." Sam crossed the room and pressed her gently back down. "You'll tear that wound open worse than it already is. You lied for me." Her voice was stronger now, touched with something like wonder. "Why?" "Seemed like the right thing to do. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done." Sam pulled a chair up to the table and sat down heavily. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the weight of what he'd just done was starting to settle in. He'd lied to a federal judge. He'd harbored a fugitive. He'd put everything he had, his ranch, his freedom, maybe his life on the line for a woman he'd known for all of 10 minutes. Margaret would have been proud. Or maybe she would have called him a fool. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. "You said they'd kill me too," he said finally. "Who are they exactly?" The woman closed her eyes. For a moment, Sam thought she'd passed out. Then she spoke. "The men who just left. Whitmore's men. Whitmore's men, Whitmore's money, Whitmore's orders." She opened her eyes and looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You just made yourself his enemy. Do you understand what that means? Suppose you tell me." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached beneath the blanket and pulled out the piece of hide she'd been clutching since he found her. "This is what they want." Sam leaned forward to look. It was a map that much was clear. Lines and symbols drawn in faded ink marking rivers and mountains and places he didn't recognize. "What is it?" "My people call it the Hide Map. It shows every underground water source within 300 miles. Every silver vein that hasn't been claimed. Every—" She stopped wincing as pain shot through her side. "Every piece of land the white government doesn't know is valuable." Sam sat back. He understood now why Whitmore wanted it. Whoever controlled the water in Wyoming controlled the territory. And the silver, that was a fortune waiting to be dug out of the ground. "Why do you have it?" "Because I'm the last one who does." Her voice cracked slightly. "My father kept it. He was chief of our band. When Whitmore's men came for it 2 years ago, they killed him. They killed my husband. They killed everyone who knew where it was hidden except me." Sam felt his stomach turn. He'd known Whitmore for 15 years. Played cards with him. Shared meals with him. Stood beside him at Margaret's funeral while the old man wept. "Cornelius did that. Your friend Cornelius has killed 47 of my people." She met his eyes, and there was no rage there, only a grief so deep it looked bottomless. "He burned our village to the ground. He hung the elders from the trees. And he smiled while he did it, the same way he smiled at you today." Sam stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He walked to the window and looked out at the empty yard, the quiet hills, the setting sun that had witnessed so many of his lonely evenings. "I didn't know," he said finally. "No, you didn't." Her voice was tired rather than accusatory. "White men rarely do." The words stung, but he couldn't argue with them. He'd spent 3 years hiding on this ranch, pretending the world outside didn't exist. Meanwhile, that world had been burning, and he'd chosen not to smell the smoke. "What's your name?" he asked without turning around. "Winter Moon." Winter Moon. He let the name settle on his tongue. It suited her somehow, beautiful but cold, distant but unforgettable. "I'm Samuel Thornton. Most folks call me Sam." "I know who you are." He turned to look at her. "You do. You were a marshal. A fair one, my grandmother said. You stopped the whiskey traders from poisoning our men. You arrested white soldiers for attacking our women when no one else would." She paused. "She said you had a good heart. That's why I crawled to your ranch instead of dying in the wilderness." Sam didn't know what to say to that. He'd always thought of his marshal days as a failure. He'd followed the law, sure, but the law hadn't protected anyone who really needed protecting. It hadn't saved the Apache villages from being burned. It hadn't kept the treaties from being broken, and it sure as hell hadn't kept Margaret alive. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She is. She also said you were foolish. A ghost of a smile crossed Wintermoon's face. She was right about that too. Sam almost laughed. Instead, he walked back to the table and knelt beside her, examining the wound through the torn buckskin. I need to clean this out. It's gonna hurt. I know. You might scream. I might? She looked at him steadily. But I won't beg you to stop. Sam nodded. He'd expected nothing less. He gathered the supplies he needed: boiling water, clean rags, the bottle of whiskey he kept for nights when the memories got too loud. Wintermoon watched him move around the cabin with those amber eyes, saying nothing, judging nothing. When he returned to her side, she had already pulled back the blanket and exposed the wound. It was ugly red and swollen, the edges starting to turn black. Another day, and the infection would have spread too far to stop. This is going to burn, he warned, holding up the whiskey. I have been shot, stabbed, and left for dead. Wintermoon's voice was dry. I think I can handle burning. Sam poured the whiskey over the wound. She didn't scream. Her body went rigid, her hands gripping the edges of the table so hard her knuckles went white, but no sound escaped her lips. Only her eyes betrayed the agony they squeezed shut, tears leaking from the corners, despite her best efforts to hold them back. Sam worked quickly, cleaning out the debris and dead tissue, checking for any fragments of bullet that might be lodged inside. There was nothing the shot had gone clean through, which was probably the only reason she was still alive. Almost done, he murmured. You're doing good. Don't, she gasped as he pressed a clean rag against the wound. Don't patronize me. Wasn't patronizing, was telling the truth. Most men I've seen would be screaming bloody murder right about now. I am not most men. No. Sam agreed quietly. You're not. He finished bandaging the wound with strips of clean cloth, then sat back and wiped his hands on his trousers. Wintermoon lay still, her breathing slowly returning to normal, her face pale but composed. You should rest, he said. I'll keep watch tonight. You don't have to do that. I know. They'll come back. Whitmore won't give up. I know that too. Wintermoon turned her head to look at him. In the fading light, her eyes seemed to glow like embers. Why are you doing this? You could have given me to them. You still could. The map would make you rich. You could... I don't want to be rich. Sam stood and walked to the window again. The first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. I just want to sleep through the night without dreaming about all the things I should have done different. Silence fell between them. It was a comfortable silence, Sam realized, the kind that didn't need to be filled with words. The kind he hadn't felt since Margaret died. Your wife, Wintermoon said finally. She passed. Sam nodded without turning around. The child too. His throat tightened. Boy. Would have been 3 years old last month, if he'd lived. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Not pity. Wintermoon didn't seem like the type for pity. Just acknowledgement. Just understanding. My husband died 2 winters ago, she said. Strong Eagle. He was a warrior, the best tracker in our band. Her voice softened. He died protecting the map, protecting me. Sometimes I wonder if he would be disappointed in how I've lived since then. Sam turned to look at her. How have you lived? Alone, hiding, running. She met his eyes. Surviving when everyone I loved did not. That takes strength. It takes cowardice. Her voice was bitter. A brave woman would have faced Whitmore long ago, would have died fighting like my husband did. A brave woman would have kept living to protect what her husband died for. Sam walked back to the table and looked down at her. Seems to me that's exactly what you've been doing. Wintermoon stared at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes filled with tears. "You are strange, Samuel Thornton." "So I've been told. Most white men see us as savages, animals, less than human. Most white men are fools." She laughed at that, a real laugh, even though it clearly hurt her wound. Sam felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for 3 years starting to thaw. "Rest now," he said, pulling the blanket up over her. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do next." "There is nothing to figure out." Her voice was already growing heavy with exhaustion. "Whitmore will come back. He'll bring more men. And when he finds me here, then I guess I'd better be ready." Wintermoon's eyes closed, but a small smile remained on her lips. "Foolish," she murmured. "My grandmother was right." Sam sat down in the chair beside the table, his rifle across his knees, and settled in for a long night. He woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Dawn was just breaking, pink light spilling through the windows. Sam was on his feet before he was fully awake. His rifle raised, his heart pounding. But it wasn't Whitmore's men. It was a single-rider young Apache with war paint on his face and fury in his eyes. He stopped at the edge of Sam's property and drew his bow. "Give me back my sister." Sam didn't lower his rifle. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Wintermoon. She came this way. Her blood is on your fence." The young warrior's voice shook with rage. "What have you done to her?" "She's alive. She's inside." For a moment, the warrior's aim wavered. Then he steadied it again. "If you've hurt her..." "I saved her life, son. If you want to thank me, you can start by putting down that bow." They stared at each other across the distance, the weathered white rancher and the fierce young Apache. Neither moved. Then a voice came from behind Sam. "Running Elk, put down your weapon." Wintermoon stood in the doorway, one hand pressed against her bandaged side, the other gripping the doorframe for support. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "This man helped me. He lied to Whitmore to protect me." Running Elk. Her brother Sam realized, slowly lowered his bow. His eyes never left Sam's face. "You lied to Whitmore." "I did. For her. For what's right." Running Elk was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at his sister. "Grandmother was right about him," he said. "He is foolish." Wintermoon smiled weakly. "That's what I told him." Sam finally lowered his rifle. "Seems like everyone's got an opinion on my judgment." Running Elk dismounted and walked toward the porch, his movements cautious, but no longer hostile. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at Sam with an expression that was hard to read. "Whitmore is gathering men. Many men. He knows Wintermoon is in this area. By sundown tomorrow, he'll have enough riders to search every ranch within 50 miles. Sam absorbed this news. It wasn't unexpected, but it still landed like a punch to the gut. "Then we've got until sundown tomorrow." "To do what?" "I don't know yet." Sam looked at Wintermoon, then back at her brother. "But I'm not handing her over. Not to Whitmore. Not to anyone." Running Elk studied him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "My grandmother said you had a good heart. She also said good hearts get men killed in this territory." "Your grandmother sounds like she's got a lot of opinions." "She does." Running Elk's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something close. "She wants to meet you. She says if you're going to die for our people, you should at least know their names first." Wintermoon made a small sound of protest. "Running Elk. She's right, and you know it." He looked at his sister with something that was both love and frustration. "You can't protect everyone by keeping them ignorant. This man chose to help us. He deserves to understand what he's chosen." Sam thought about it. Every instinct he had screamed at him to stay put, to fortify his ranch, to prepare for the fight that was coming. But another voice, Margaret's voice maybe, or just the ghost of the man he used to be, told him that hiding had never saved anyone. "All right," he said. Take me to your grandmother." Winter Moon's eyes widened. "Sam, you can't." "I can." He turned to look at her, and something passed between them that he couldn't name. "If I'm gonna fight beside your people, I should probably know who I'm fighting for." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Then we go together." Running Elk raised an eyebrow. "You can barely stand." "Watch me." She straightened, pulling herself away from the doorframe through sheer force of will. Her face went white with the effort, and Sam could see her trembling, but she didn't fall. "Stubborn?" Running Elk muttered. "Family trait," Winter Moon replied. Sam felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. These two reminded him of something he'd lost: that easy banter between siblings, that unbreakable bond of blood. He'd never had brothers or sisters himself. For a brief moment, he wondered what that might have felt like. "I'll get the horses," he said. "One horse." Winter Moon's voice was firm despite its weakness. "I ride with you." Sam started to protest, then caught the look in her eyes. This wasn't negotiable. "All right." He moved toward the barn, then stopped and looked back at her. "But if you pass out and fall off, I'm not stopping to pick you up." "Fair enough." Grandmother was wrong, Running Elk said to his sister as Sam disappeared into the barn. "He's not just foolish, he's mad." Winter Moon watched the barn door, something unreadable in her amber eyes. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "but perhaps we need a little madness right now." An hour later, they were riding north. Sam sat in front, Winter Moon pressed against his back, her arms wrapped around his waist for support. Every step of the horse must have sent agony through her wounded side, but she made no sound. Stubborn indeed. Running Elk led the way, guiding them through paths that weren't marked on any white man's map. They crossed streams and ducked beneath rock overhangs and wound through canyons so narrow Sam could touch both walls with his outstretched arms. "Whitmore could never find this route," Sam observed. "That's the idea," Running Elk replied without looking back. They rode for 3 hours before the canyon opened up into a hidden valley. Sam felt his breath catch in his throat. He'd expected something small, a handful of tents, maybe a dozen people. Instead, he found himself looking at a community. Lodges dotted the valley floor, and smoke rose from cooking fires. He saw children playing near a stream, women working animal hides, old men sitting in circles and talking. It was alive, it was thriving, and every single face turned toward him with suspicion in their eyes. "Stay calm," Winter Moon murmured in his ear. "Let me speak first." Running Elk dismounted and spoke rapidly in a language Sam didn't understand. The crowd parted, and an old woman emerged from one of the larger lodges. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with white hair braided down her back and a face carved by decades of desert wind. But her eyes were sharp young, and they fixed on Sam with an intensity that made him want to look away. "Grandmother?" Winter Moon said, sliding down from the horse with Sam's help. "This is Samuel Thornton, the one you spoke of." The old woman walks in mourning, Sam remembered, approached slowly. She stopped in front of him and looked up, studying his face the way a trader might examine a horse. "You have sad eyes," she said finally. Her English was accented but clear. "You have lost someone you loved." Sam swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "You blame yourself." It wasn't a question. "Every day." Walks in mourning nodded slowly. Then she reached up and placed her wrinkled hand on his chest, right over his heart. "The pain you carry," she said quietly. "It does not make you weak. It makes you human. But if you let it consume you, it will hollow you out until there is nothing left." Sam felt his eyes burn. He blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because my granddaughter has chosen to trust you." The old woman's eyes flickered to Winter Moon, then back to Sam. "And her judgment in men has not always been sound." "Grandmother," Winter Moon protested. It's true, and we both know it. Strong Eagle was brave, but he was also reckless. He died because he would not retreat when retreat was wisdom. He died protecting me. He died because his pride was larger than his sense. Walks in Morning's voice was gentle but firm. I loved him as a grandson, but I will not pretend he was perfect. Winter Moon fell silent, her face troubled. The old woman turned back to Sam. You lied to Whitmore. You protected my granddaughter when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Why? Sam thought about the question. The easy answer was that it was the right thing to do. But that wasn't entirely true. The right thing to do would have been to stay in that moment, to not get involved, to let someone else carry this burden. Because I'm tired of standing aside, he said finally. Because for 3 years I've been hiding from the world, pretending that if I just kept quiet, the ugliness would pass me by. But it doesn't. It never does. He looked at Winter Moon, then back at her grandmother. Your granddaughter crawled to my door dying, and she still wouldn't give up that map. She was ready to die rather than let Whitmore win. If she can have that kind of courage, the least I can do is match it. Walks in Morning studied him for a long moment. Then something changed in her face, a softening, a small smile. Good heart, she said quietly. Foolish, but good. That seems to be the consensus. She laughed, a dry, crackling sound like autumn leaves. Then she turned to address the gathered crowd. She spoke in her own language, and Sam couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. She was introducing him, explaining him. And from the way some of the suspicious faces began to relax, she was vouching for him. When she finished, she turned back to Sam. You are welcome here, Samuel Thornton. But understand this, if Whitmore comes, we will not run. We have run enough. This valley is our home now, and we will defend it with our last breath. I understand. Do you understand that if you stand with us, you may die with us? Sam looked around at the faces watching him, the children, the elders, the warriors with weapons at their sides. He saw Winter Moon pale but standing, her eyes fixed on him with an expression he couldn't read. He saw Running Elk, still suspicious, but willing to wait and judge. And he thought about Margaret, about the son he'd never held, about all the years he'd wasted waiting for a reason to keep living. Maybe this was it. I understand, he said, and I'm not going anywhere. That first night in the Apache camp, Sam couldn't sleep. He lay on a bedroll inside one of the lodges they'd given him, staring up at the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this hidden valley. The soft murmur of voices outside, the distant cry of a night bird, the crackle of dying fires, and beneath it all the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat, reminding him that he was still alive when so many others weren't. You're thinking too loud. The voice came from the doorway. Sam sat up quickly, his hand reaching for the rifle beside him, before he recognized Winter Moon's silhouette. Shouldn't you be resting? Shouldn't you? She moved into the lodge slowly, carefully, one hand pressed against her bandaged side. My grandmother says you've been lying there for 3 hours without closing your eyes. Your grandmother watches me sleep. My grandmother watches everything. Winter Moon lowered herself onto a pile of furs near the entrance, wincing slightly. She says it's how she stayed alive so long. Sam relaxed his grip on the rifle, but didn't let go entirely. Old habits died hard. Why are you here, Winter Moon? Because I owe you answers. She pulled a blanket around her shoulders, and in the dim light, Sam could see how young she actually was. Late 20s, maybe. Young enough to be his daughter if things had gone differently. You saved my life. You lied to a powerful man. You followed me into the wilderness without knowing where you were going or why. The least I can do is tell you the truth. I thought you already did. Whitmore wants the map. He killed your family for it. That's the what. But you don't know the why. Sam waited. Winter Moon took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was different. Older somehow, heavier. Cornelius Whitmore came to this territory 15 years ago. He was a young lawyer, then ambitious, hungry. He made friends with the ranchers, and the miners learned who had power and who didn't. He positioned himself as a man of justice, a defender of the law. I remember. I was one of the marshals who worked under him. I know. Wintermoon's eyes met his. You were also one of the only ones who didn't take his money. Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach. What money? Whitmore has been buying lawmen for over a decade. Sheriffs, deputies, federal marshals. Anyone who might interfere with his plans. Those who refused to take his gold. She paused. They had accidents. Convenient ones. I never took a cent from him. Which is why you're still alive. Wintermoon's voice was matter-of-fact. He couldn't kill you without raising suspicion. A decorated marshal with a spotless record married to a beloved woman from a founding family. It would have drawn too much attention. Sam's hands tightened on the rifle. Are you saying he wanted me dead? I'm saying he still does. He just hasn't found the right opportunity yet. The words hung in the air between them. Sam thought about all those years he'd spent trusting Whitmore, believing in his friendship, never questioning why the man always seemed to be one step ahead of everyone else. The map, he said finally. What's really on it? Wintermoon reached into her dress and pulled out the piece of hide. Even in the darkness, Sam could see the lines and symbols drawn across its surface. My father created this when I was a child. He spent 20 years walking this land learning its secrets. Every water source, every silver vein, every place where the earth holds treasures that white men would kill for. She traced one of the lines with her finger. But that's not why Whitmore wants it. Then why? Because of what's at the center. She turned the hide so Sam could see. In the middle of all the other markings was a single symbol different from the rest. It looked almost like a sun, with rays extending outward in all directions. That mark represents the sacred spring, the one that feeds every river and stream in this territory. Control that spring, and you control the water for 300 miles in every direction. Sam understood immediately. In the arid west, water was more valuable than gold. Ranchers would pay any price for it. Miners would kill for it. Entire towns would rise or fall based on who controlled the rivers. If Whitmore finds that spring, he becomes the most powerful man west of the Mississippi. Wintermoon folded the hide carefully and tucked it back into her dress. He could charge whatever he wants for water rights. He could dry up farms and ranches that don't pay tribute. He could build an empire, and no one would be able to stop him. And your people have been protecting this secret for generations. For longer than white men have been on this land. Her voice carried a weight of centuries. The spring is sacred to us. It's where our ancestors are buried. It's where we go to speak to the spirits of those we've lost. Sam thought about his own lost ones. Margaret buried in the little cemetery outside Laramie. The son who never got a name laid to rest beside her. Why are you telling me this? Because tomorrow you're going to have to choose again. Wintermoon's eyes held his. My brother thinks we should use you as a distraction. Let Whitmore focus on hunting you while we move the camp to a safer location. And what do you think? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. I think you're the first honest white man I've met since my mother died. Sam blinked. Your mother. She was like you. White, I mean. Captured by the Comanche when she was a child, traded to our people, raised as one of us. She married my father and bore him 3 children. She died in the same raid that killed him. I'm sorry. Don't be. She lived more fully in her years with us than she ever would have in the white world. Wintermoon's voice softened. She used to tell me that blood doesn't make a family. Choices do. Sam thought about that. About the family he'd lost and the emptiness he'd been carrying ever since. What happened to your other siblings? You mentioned 3 children. Pain flickered across Wintermoon's face. My younger brother died in the raid. He was only 12. My older sister. She stopped, swallowed. Whitmore's men took her. We found her body 3 days later. Good Lord. She was 15. Wintermoon's voice was steady, but Sam could hear the cracks beneath the surface. Whitmore said it was regrettable collateral damage. He said it at a church service in front of 100 people, and they all nodded along like he was speaking gospel. Sam felt rage building in his chest. The kind of rage he hadn't felt since Margaret died, since he'd stood in that empty room with the blood-stained sheets and screamed at a God who wouldn't answer. "I'll kill him." The words came out before he could stop them. Wintermoon looked at him with something that might have been surprise. "You barely know me." "I know enough." Sam gripped the rifle so hard his knuckles went white. "I know what it's like to lose everyone you love. I know what it's like to feel helpless while the world takes everything from you. And I know that Whitmore is a monster who's been hiding behind a judge's robes for 15 years. And you think killing him will make things better? I think it'll make things right." Wintermoon shook her head slowly. "My husband said the same thing. He rode out to face Whitmore's men alone, convinced that his courage would be enough. They brought his body back in pieces. I'm not your husband." "No, you're not." She looked at him with those amber eyes, and something passed between them that Sam couldn't name. Strong Eagle was brave and foolish. You are... She paused, searching for the right word. Careful. Patient. You think before you act. Sometimes that's worse. Sometimes thinking just gives you more time to be afraid. Fear isn't weakness, Samuel. Fear is wisdom. Only fools feel nothing when they face death. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since he first saw her bleeding on his land. "Why didn't you kill Whitmore yourself? You had years. You know where he lives, where he travels. A woman with your skills could have put an arrow through his heart a dozen times over." Wintermoon's face changed. The strength faded, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. "Because I'm not sure I deserve to survive it." The confession hung in the air between them. Sam understood it immediately. It was the same thought that had kept him trapped on his ranch for 3 years, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. "Your husband died protecting you," he said quietly. "Your parents died protecting the map. If you throw your life away on revenge, everything they sacrificed becomes meaningless. And if I do nothing, if I hide in this valley forever, while Whitmore builds his empire on the bones of my people, then you find another way, a way that doesn't end with you dead in the dirt." Wintermoon stared at him for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. "My grandmother was right. You are strange. So people keep telling me." She pushed herself to her feet, wincing at the pain in her side. Sam moved to help her, but she waved him off. "I can stand on my own." "I know you can. Doesn't mean you have to." Something flickered in her eyes. Not quite warmth, but something close to it. "Get some sleep, Samuel Thornton. Tomorrow will be harder than today." She left without another word, and Sam lay back down on his bedroll, his mind churning with everything she'd told him. But this time, when he closed his eyes, sleep came. The next morning brought trouble. Sam woke to the sound of raised voices outside. He grabbed his rifle and pushed through the lodge's entrance to find a crowd gathered near the center of the camp. Running Elk stood in the middle, his face dark with fury. Across from him stood an older man Sam didn't recognize, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression equally hostile. "You brought a white man into our home," the older man shouted. "After everything they've done to us, you invite one of them to sleep among our children." He saved Wintermoon's life. Running Elk shot back. He lied to Whitmore to protect her. Today he lies to Whitmore. Tomorrow he lies to us. That is what white men do. Sam pushed through the crowd and stepped into the open space between the two men. The older one's eyes locked onto him, immediately burning with hatred. "You should not be here," the man said in English. You are not welcome. I know I'm not. Sam kept his voice calm, his hands away from his weapon. But I'm here anyway. Crow Feather. Running Elk's voice was sharp. He's under grandmother's protection. Your grandmother is old. Her mind is not what it was. Watch your tongue. The warning came from Walks in Mourning herself, emerging from her lodge with Winter Moon at her side. My mind is sharp enough to remember when you hid behind your mother's skirts during the Comanche raids, Crow Feather. Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. Crow Feather's face reddened. That was many winters ago. And yet some things do not change. The old woman walked forward until she stood directly in front of the angry man. Despite being nearly a foot shorter, she somehow seemed to tower over him. Samuel Thornton is my guest. He will be treated as such. And when Whitmore's men come, when they follow this white man's trail to our doorstep, then we will fight, as we have always fought. We are not enough. Crow Feather's voice dropped, the anger fading into something closer to fear. We are women and children and old men. The warriors who survived the raid. There are barely 20 of us. Whitmore has 50 men, maybe more. Numbers are not everything. They are when the other side has guns and horses and the law on their side. Sam stepped forward. Every eye in the camp turned to him. He's right. The words surprised everyone, including Running Elk. Walks in Mourning raised an eyebrow. You agree with him? About the numbers? Yes. 20 warriors against 50 armed men is a massacre waiting to happen. Sam looked around at the faces watching him. But there might be another way. What way? Crow Feather's voice dripped with suspicion. Whitmore's power comes from his reputation. He's a federal judge, a man of the law. If people knew what he really was, if they saw the truth, white people will never believe an Apache over a judge. They might believe a former U.S. Marshal. Sam met the man's eyes steadily. They might believe one of their own. Silence fell over the crowd. Sam could feel the weight of their skepticism, their doubt. They'd been betrayed too many times to trust easily. But Walks in Mourning was nodding slowly. What do you propose, Samuel Thornton? Sam took a deep breath. The plan had been forming in his mind since last night, but saying it out loud made it terrifyingly real. Whitmore needs the map to find the sacred spring. Without it, he's got nothing. If we can expose him before he finds it, before he builds his empire, we take away everything he's worked for. And how do we expose him? Running Elk asked. We give him what he wants. Sam looked at Winter Moon. Or at least we make him think we do. Winter Moon's eyes widened. You want to use the map as bait. I want to use the map to draw him out, to make him show his true colors in front of witnesses who can't be bought or threatened. If we can get him to admit what he's done, what he's planning, he'll never admit anything. Crow Feather's voice was dismissive. He's not a fool. No, he's not. But he is arrogant. Sam remembered all those chess games, all those conversations where Whitmore had talked about destiny and power and the natural order of things. He believes he's untouchable, that no one would dare challenge him. If we push the right buttons, he might make a mistake. Winter Moon finished. She was looking at Sam with something new in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or something more. It's a risk, Sam admitted. A big one, but it's better than sitting here waiting for him to find you. The crowd murmured among themselves. Sam could see the debate playing out on their faces, the hope warring with the fear. Finally, Walks in Mourning spoke. We will discuss this in council. All voices will be heard. She looked at Sam. Including yours if you wish to speak. Sam nodded. I'd be honored. The council lasted most of the day. Sam sat in a circle with the elders and warriors of the band, listening as they debated in a mixture of Apache and English. Some supported his plan. Others thought it was suicide. A few wanted to simply kill him and flee deeper into the mountains. But through it all, one voice was notably absent. Winter Moon sat across the circle from Sam, her face unreadable, her lips sealed. She'd barely spoken since the council began, and Sam found himself wondering what she was thinking. When the sun began to set and the arguments started to repeat themselves, walks in. Morning raised her hand for silence. "We have heard enough. Now we will decide." She went around the circle, asking each person in turn for their judgment. The votes were closer than Sam had expected. But when the final count was made, the plan had passed, by a margin of 1. "It is settled," Walks in Morning declared. "We will attempt Samuel Thornton's strategy. But if it fails—" She looked at Sam directly. "The responsibility will be his." "I understand." "Do you—" The old woman's voice was sharp. "If your plan leads my people to slaughter, there will be no forgiveness. Not in this life or the next." "I wouldn't ask for it." Something that might have been approval flickered in her ancient eyes. Then she turned to the others. "We have much to prepare. Tomorrow we begin." As the council dispersed, Wintermoon finally approached Sam. Her face was still unreadable, but her voice held an edge he hadn't heard before. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They walked in silence until they reached the edge of the camp where the valley floor met the rising hills. Wintermoon stopped and turned to face him. "You didn't tell them everything." Sam met her gaze. "I told them what they needed to know. You told them your plan might expose Whitmore. You didn't tell them it will almost certainly get you killed." He had no answer for that. She was right, and they both knew it. "Why?" Wintermoon's voice cracked slightly, the first sign of real emotion she'd shown all day. "Why would you throw your life away for people you barely know?" Sam looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something he hadn't admitted to anyone, not even himself. "Because I've been dead for 3 years anyway." Wintermoon flinched like he'd struck her. "When Margaret died, when my son died, something inside me died with them. I've been walking around, eating, sleeping, breathing, but I haven't been alive. Not really." He looked up at the darkening sky. "Then you crawled onto my land, and for the first time since I lost them, I felt something. Purpose, maybe, or just the chance to matter again. You matter." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "You matter to these people now. You matter to—" She stopped, looked away. "To who?" Wintermoon was silent for so long that Sam thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My husband was a warrior. He fought because fighting was all he knew. He never asked me what I wanted, never considered that there might be a path that didn't end in blood." She turned back to face Sam. "You're different. You think about consequences. You care about the people around you, not just the glory of battle. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's the highest compliment I know how to give." She stepped closer, close enough that Sam could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you won't die for nothing. If your plan fails, if Whitmore wins, run. Find a way to survive. Don't let your guilt turn you into a martyr." Sam wanted to promise. He wanted to tell her that he'd fight to live, that he had something to live for now. But he'd made promises before to Margaret, to his son, and he'd broken every one. "I can't promise that." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what's going to happen, and I won't lie to you." Wintermoon stared at him. Then slowly she reached out and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. The same gesture her grandmother had made the day before. "You have a good heart, Samuel Thornton. Too good for this world, maybe." Her voice was soft. "But good hearts are the ones worth saving." She pulled her hand away and turned to walk back to the camp. Sam watched her go, his heart pounding against his ribs. That night, he slept better than he had in years. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Running elk taught Sam the trails and signals the Apache used to communicate across distances. Walks in mourning shared stories of Whitmore's past crimes details that could be used to sway potential allies. And Wintermoon, despite her wound, insisted on teaching Sam the basics of tracking. "You move like a buffalo," she told him during one of their sessions, loud and obvious. "I'm a rancher, not a scout. Then learn to be both." She pointed to a set of tracks in the soft earth. "What do you see?" Sam studied the marks. "Deer, maybe 2 days old. 1 day. And it's not a deer, it's an antelope. See how the hooves are narrower, how the stride is longer." "I see it now." "Good, you're learning." Something that might have been a smile crossed her face. "Slowly, but learning." These moments, quiet and unexpected, became the highlight of Sam's days. He found himself looking forward to them, to the sound of Wintermoon's voice, to the rare flash of humor that broke through her guarded exterior. He tried not to think about what that meant. On the 4th day, a scout came running into camp with news. Whitmore was on the move. 60 men, armed and mounted, heading north toward the valley. They would arrive within 2 days. The time for preparation was over. That night, the entire camp gathered around a central fire. Walks in mourning stood before them, her frail body somehow radiating strength. "Tomorrow, we ride out to meet our enemy. Some of us will not return." Her voice carried across the silent crowd. "But we do not fight for glory or vengeance. We fight for the children who will come after us, for the land that has sheltered our ancestors, for the future that Whitmore would steal from us." She looked at Sam, and something passed between them. An understanding. "Samuel Thornton is not of our blood, but he has proven himself a man of honor. He will lead the first part of our plan, and we will trust him as we trust our own." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Not all of them were approving, but when Walks in mourning raised her hand, silence fell. "Now we rest. Tomorrow we fight." The crowd dispersed slowly. Sam stayed by the fire watching the flames dance, thinking about everything that could go wrong. "You should sleep." Wintermoon appeared beside him, her face half lit by the firelight. "Can't." "Neither can I." She sat down next to him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I keep thinking about my parents, about Strong Eagle, about everyone we've lost." "That's natural." "Is it?" She looked at him. "Sometimes I wonder if the dead are watching us, judging us, waiting to see if we're worthy of their sacrifice. If they are, what do you think they'd say?" Wintermoon was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think my mother would say I'm being stubborn. She always said I got that from my father." "And your father?" "He would say I'm being too cautious, that I should have killed Whitmore long ago." "What about Strong Eagle?" Pain flickered across her face. He would say I'm thinking too much, that I should trust my instincts and stop second-guessing myself." "What do your instincts tell you?" She turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes seemed to glow. "They tell me to trust you." Sam felt his heart skip. "That might be a mistake." "Probably." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "But I'm tired of playing it safe. I've been hiding for 2 years, and it hasn't brought my family back. It hasn't stopped Whitmore. It hasn't done anything but keep me alive." "Being alive is important. Is it?" Her voice was soft, thoughtful. "Or is it just existing? There's a difference, Samuel. I think you know that better than anyone." He did know. He'd spent 3 years learning the difference between living and merely surviving. "If we get through this," he said slowly, "what will you do?" "I don't know. I've been so focused on staying alive that I never thought about what comes after." She looked at the fire. "What about you?" Sam considered the question. For so long his future had been a blank wall, featureless and uninviting. But now, for the first time, he could almost see something beyond it. "I think I'd like to build something that matters." "What kind of something?" "I don't know yet. Maybe a place where people like your grandmother's band can live without fear, where Apache and white folks can exist together without one trying to destroy the other. Winter Moon laughed softly. That's a big dream. It is. Most people would say it's impossible. Most people said it was impossible for a rancher to hide an Apache woman from a federal judge. We seem to be doing all right so far. She looked at him, and something changed in her expression. The walls she'd built around herself seemed to crack just slightly. Samuel Thornton. Yes. Thank you. For what? For giving me something to believe in again. Before he could respond, she leaned over and pressed her lips to his cheek. It was brief, barely a whisper of contact, but it sent a shock through Sam's entire body. Then she stood and walked away, leaving him alone with the dying fire and a heart that had suddenly remembered how to beat. Tomorrow would bring battle and blood and the very real possibility of death. But tonight, for just a moment, Sam allowed himself to hope. And hope he was discovering was the most dangerous weapon of all. Dawn came too quickly. Sam stood at the edge of the camp, watching the first light spread across the valley, trying to quiet the storm inside his chest. In a few hours, everything would change. Either his plan would work, or they would all be dead. You look like a man waiting for his own hanging. Running Elk appeared beside him, his face painted for war, his bow strung and ready. Feels about the same. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. The young warrior looked out at the same horizon Sam was watching. My sister told me what you said last night. About building something. A place where our people could live in peace. Did she now? She also told me you kissed her. Sam's head snapped toward him. She kissed me. On the cheek. There's a difference. Running Elk's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been amusement. In my culture, that's as good as a proposal. I don't think that's true. It isn't. But watching you panic was entertaining. Sam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You're a cruel man, Running Elk. I'm a protective brother. The amusement faded, replaced by something harder. Winter Moon has been through enough. If you hurt her, I'll put an arrow through your heart before you can blink. Fair enough. But if you keep her safe... Running Elk paused, choosing his words carefully. Then I will call you brother. And that is not something I say lightly. Before Sam could respond, a cry went up from the scouts positioned on the ridge above the valley. 3 sharp whistles repeated twice. Whitmore's men had been spotted. The camp exploded into controlled chaos. Warriors grabbed weapons and moved to their positions. Women gathered children and herded them toward the hidden caves at the back of the valley. Elders took up defensive positions around the lodges, ready to fight if the plan failed. Sam found Winter Moon near the central fire, helping walks in mourning onto a horse. You shouldn't be riding, Winter Moon said to her grandmother. Your bones are too old for this. My bones will outlast yours if you don't stop fussing. The old woman settled into the saddle with surprising grace. I've been fighting white men since before your mother was born. I'm not about to stop now. Grandmother. Enough. Walks in Mourning's voice carried the weight of command. We all have our roles to play. Mine is to be seen, to remind Whitmore that the Apache do not hide like rabbits in a hole. She looked at Sam, and her ancient eyes seemed to pierce right through him. Are you ready, Samuel Thornton? No, but I'll do it anyway. That is the only honest answer a warrior can give. She nodded once, then turned her horse toward the ridge. May the spirits watch over us all. Sam watched her go, then turned to Winter Moon. She was already dressed for the coming confrontation, her wound hidden beneath layers of buckskin, a knife at her belt. You're supposed to stay with the children, he said. And you're supposed to mind your own business. Winter Moon. Don't. Her voice was fierce, but beneath it he could hear the fear. I didn't survive this long by hiding while others fought. I won't start now. If something happens to you, then it happens. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the rapid pulse beating in her throat. "I'm not your wife, Samuel. I'm not your responsibility." "No, you're not my wife." He reached out and took her hand, feeling her fingers tremble against his palm. "But you're something. I don't know what yet, and I'd like the chance to find out." Wintermoon's breath caught. For a long moment, she just looked at him, her amber eyes searching his face for something he couldn't name. "If we survive this," she said quietly, "I'll let you find out." "Is that a promise?" "It's a threat." But she was almost smiling. "Now go. Whitmore won't wait forever." Sam squeezed her hand once, then let go. He mounted his horse and rode toward the ridge where Running Elk and the other warriors were waiting. The plan was simple in theory. Sam would ride out to meet Whitmore alone under a flag of truce. He would claim to have captured Winter Moon and offer to trade her for safe passage out of the territory. Whitmore, believing he'd won, would come to collect his prize, and that's when the trap would spring. But simple plans had a way of falling apart when they met reality. And Whitmore hadn't survived this long by being stupid. Sam crested the ridge and saw them. 60 men spread out across the plain below. More than the scouts had estimated. They were well armed, well mounted, and arranged in a formation that spoke of military training. And at their head, sitting tall on a white horse, was Judge Cornelius Whitmore. Even from this distance, Sam could see the cold satisfaction on the man's face. Whitmore thought he'd won. Thought this was the moment he'd been waiting for, when the last obstacle to his empire would finally be removed. Sam raised the white flag he'd been carrying and started down the slope. The ride felt like it lasted hours. Every hoofbeat brought him closer to the man who'd destroyed Wintermoon's family, who'd corrupted everything Sam had once believed in. His hand itched for his gun, but he forced himself to keep it still. Not yet. Not until the moment was right. He stopped 50 feet from Whitmore's position. The judge urged his horse forward to meet him, leaving his men behind. "Samuel." Whitmore's voice was warm, almost friendly. "I knew you'd see reason eventually." "Cornelius." "I must say you've led us on quite a chase. I expected better from you." "I expected better from a lot of things." Something flickered in Whitmore's pale eyes. "You sound bitter." "I sound tired. There's a difference." Whitmore studied him for a long moment. "You have the woman. I have her. And the map? That too." "Excellent." The judge's smile widened. "I always knew you were a practical man, Samuel. It's what I liked about you." "We weren't friends, Cornelius. We were never friends." "No, I seem to recall many pleasant evenings at your home. Chess games, whiskey conversations about the future of this territory." "You were gathering intelligence, seeing how much I knew how much of a threat I might be." "Well." Whitmore inclined his head slightly. "Perhaps, but I genuinely enjoyed your company. You're one of the few men in this territory who can hold an intelligent conversation. Is that why you didn't kill me too boring without someone to talk to?" "I didn't kill you because Margaret was a founding family's daughter. Her death would have been investigated thoroughly. Yours would have followed." He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. "But now Margaret is gone and you've made yourself a fugitive by harboring a savage. No one will ask questions when you disappear." Sam felt the rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Before we do this, I want to know one thing." "Ask." "The night you raided Wintermoon's village, the children you murdered, the elders you hung from the trees." Sam leaned forward in his saddle. "Did you enjoy it?" Something changed in Whitmore's face. The mask of civility slipped, and beneath it, Sam saw the monster he'd always suspected was there. "Enjoy is such a simple word," Whitmore said softly. "What I felt that night was satisfaction. The satisfaction of removing obstacles, of clearing the path to destiny." Destiny. "This territory will be mine, Samuel. Every drop of water, every ounce of silver, every inch of land. The Apache were simply in the way. They had to be removed. And the children, the girls who were taken. Whitmore waved a hand dismissively. Collateral damage. Regrettable, but necessary. Necessary. Sam's voice was flat. You raped and murdered children, and you call it necessary. I call it the price of empire. Whitmore's eyes gleamed with something that might have been madness. History is written by the victor Samuel. When I control this territory, no one will remember a few dead savages. They'll remember me, the man who tamed the West. Sam stared at the man he'd once called a friend. A man he'd trusted, respected, mourned beside at his wife's grave, and he felt something inside him harden into steel. You're wrong, Cornelius. Oh. History will remember you, but not the way you think. Sam raised his hand. From the ridge behind him, a single arrow flew through the air. It struck the ground between Whitmore's horse and Sam's, quivering in the dirt. Whitmore's men drew their weapons, but the judge held up a hand to stop them. What is this, Samuel? That's a signal. Sam smiled grimly. Not for my people. For yours. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? The night before last, Running Elk and his warriors visited every ranch within 20 miles. They told the ranchers what you really are, what you've done, who you've killed. Sam nodded toward the ridge. Take a look, Cornelius. Your men aren't alone. Whitmore turned in his saddle. Along the ridgeline, figures were appearing, not Apache warriors, but ranchers, farmers, townspeople. Men and women Sam had known for years, people who'd lost faith in the law, but not in justice. There were maybe 30 of them, armed with rifles and shotguns, spread out along the high ground. They can't shoot at me, Whitmore said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. I'm a federal judge. You're a murderer, and thanks to running that mouth of yours, they just heard you admit it. Whitmore's face went pale. He turned back to Sam, his eyes wild. You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove it. Sam pointed toward a figure on the ridge, a woman in a blue dress with a notebook in her hands. That's Elizabeth Warren, editor of the Laramie Gazette. She's been writing down every word you said since you started talking. That's hearsay. It'll never hold up in court. Maybe not in your court. But there are other courts, Cornelius. Federal courts in Washington where judges can't be bought with silver. Sam leaned forward. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. The only thing that's been protecting you is the belief that no one would dare challenge you. Well, I'm challenging you. We all are. Whitmore looked at the ranchers on the ridge, then at his own men. Some of them were shifting uneasily, exchanging glances. They'd signed on to fight Apache warriors, not their own neighbors. This is treason, Whitmore hissed. No, this is justice. Sam turned his horse sideways, blocking Whitmore's path. You've got two choices. You can surrender now, face trial in Washington, and maybe spend the rest of your life in prison instead of swinging from a rope. Or you can fight. If I fight, you'll die. Probably. But so will you, and so will a lot of your men. Sam looked at the mounted riders behind Whitmore. How many of them do you think are willing to die for a man who murders children? How many of them even knew what you really are? Murmurs rippled through Whitmore's ranks. One man, then another, began to lower their weapons. Stop! Whitmore screamed. I command you to. You don't command anyone anymore. Sam's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. It's over, Cornelius. The empire you dreamed of, the power you killed for, it's gone. All that's left is the choice. Surrender or die. Whitmore's face contorted with rage. His hand moved toward his pistol. Time seemed to slow. Sam saw the movement, knew he couldn't draw fast enough to stop it. He braced himself for the bullet, for the end of everything. But the shot that rang out didn't come from Whitmore's gun. It came from the ridge. Whitmore's horse screamed and reared. The bullet had struck its flank, not fatally, but enough to throw the judge from his saddle. He hit the ground hard, his pistol flying from his grip. Sam looked up and saw Winter Moon on the ridge, a smoking rifle in her hands. She'd saved his life. Again. Sam dismounted and walked toward the fallen judge. Whitmore was struggling to rise, his face twisted with pain and fury. "This isn't over," he spat. "I have friends in Washington. You have nothing." Sam kicked the pistol away and stood over him. "The only thing you have left is the chance to face justice instead of a bullet." Whitmore looked up at him with pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Thornton. I swear to God you'll—" "Sam!" Running Elk's voice cut through the chaos. Sam turned and saw the young warrior riding hard down the ridge, pointing toward Whitmore's men. "Some of them are breaking." Sam looked. A group of about 20 riders had separated from the main force and were galloping toward the valley, toward the camp, toward the children. "Go!" Sam shouted to Running Elk. "Protect the camp. I'll handle things here." Running Elk nodded and wheeled his horse, racing back toward the valley with a dozen warriors at his heels. Sam turned back to Whitmore's remaining men. Most of them had dismounted, their weapons lowered. They'd seen their leader fall, heard his confession, and they wanted no part of what came next. But a handful remained defiant. Their guns still raised their eyes, calculating the odds. "Put down your weapons," Sam called out. "This is over. There's no need for more blood. And if we don't—" The speaker was a hard-faced man with a scar across his cheek. One of Whitmore's lieutenants, probably. "You think those ranchers will shoot us down? They're farmers, not fighters." "Maybe not. But the Apache warriors behind you are." The man turned. During the confrontation, Walks in Mourning had led a group of warriors around the flanks. They now stood in a semicircle behind Whitmore's men, bows drawn, arrows nocked. "We don't want to kill you," Sam said quietly. "But we will if we have to." The scar-faced man looked at the warriors, then at the ranchers on the ridge, then at his fallen leader groaning in the dirt. Slowly, he lowered his gun. The others followed. Sam let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. It wasn't over yet. Not with 20 riders heading toward the camp, but the main threat had been neutralized. He walked back to where Whitmore lay and knelt beside him. "You want to know something, Cornelius? Something I've been thinking about for a long time." Whitmore glared at him, silent. "The night Margaret died, you came to my house. You held my hand while I wept. You told me that God had a plan, that everything happened for a reason. What of it? I believed you. For 3 years I believed that Margaret's death was part of some divine purpose, that my suffering had meaning." Sam leaned closer. "But now I know the truth. There is no grand plan. There's just people. Some of them choose to do good, and some of them choose to do evil. And the only thing that matters is which choice we make." He stood and looked down at the man who'd destroyed so many lives. "I choose to let you live, to face trial, to spend the rest of your miserable existence knowing that you lost." Whitmore's face twisted. "You think you've won? You've won nothing. You're still a broken man, Thornton. Still empty. Still alive." Sam's voice was quiet. "And that's more than you deserve." He turned and walked away, leaving Whitmore lying in the dirt where he belonged. The fight at the camp was over by the time Sam arrived. Running Elk and his warriors had intercepted Whitmore's raiders before they could reach the children's hiding place. 3 of the attackers lay dead. The rest had fled into the wilderness, pursued by Apache arrows. No one from the band had been killed. Sam found Winter Moon standing near the central fire, her rifle still in her hands, her face pale but composed. "You shot his horse," he said. "I was aiming for him." "You missed, on purpose." She met his eyes. "You said you wanted him to face justice. I decided to let you have what you wanted." Sam felt something shift in his chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She looked toward the ridge where the ranchers were still watching. "This isn't over. Whitmore has friends, powerful ones. They'll come for us eventually. Then we'll face them. Together. Winter Moon studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Together. Walks in Morning appeared beside them, her ancient face etched with exhaustion, but also something that might have been satisfaction. You did well, Samuel Thornton. We all did. Yes, we did. The old woman looked at her granddaughter, then back at Sam. The council will meet tonight to decide what comes next. But I want you to know something first. What's that? You are no longer a guest in this camp. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You are family. Sam felt his throat tighten. He thought about Margaret, about the son he'd never held, about all the years he'd spent alone. I don't know what to say. Then say nothing. Words are not always necessary. Walks in Morning smiled, a rare and beautiful thing. Actions speak louder, and your actions have spoken clearly. She turned and walked away, leaving Sam and Winter Moon alone. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, side by side, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. What happens now? Sam asked finally. I don't know. Winter Moon's voice was soft, thoughtful. But for the first time in 2 years, I'm not afraid to find out. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm against his palm. Sam looked at her, at this woman who'd crawled onto his land dying and had somehow brought him back to life. Neither am I, he said, and he meant it. The council met as the sun began its descent toward the western ridge. Sam sat in the circle with the elders and warriors, feeling the weight of their gazes upon him. Whitmore was bound to a post at the edge of the camp, guarded by 2 warriors who watched him with cold, unwavering eyes. The ranchers who had come to help had returned to their homes, carrying with them stories that would spread through the territory like wildfire. But the question of what came next remained unanswered. He should die. Crow Feather's voice was hard, unforgiving. He murdered our people. He burned our village. He took our children and used them like animals. There is only one justice for such a man. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the circle. Sam understood the sentiment. Part of him, the part that had seen Winter Moon's face when she spoke of her sister, wanted the same thing. But another part of him remembered Margaret's words spoken on a cold winter night when he'd come home bloody from a gunfight with outlaws. Killing is easy, she'd said. Living with what you've killed is hard. If we execute him here, Sam said quietly, we become what he called us. Savages. Murderers. Everything he told the white world we are. We are not murderers. Running Elk's voice was sharp. We are warriors seeking justice. I know that. You know that. But the people in Washington don't. They'll see a federal judge killed by Apache hands, and they'll send the army. Not 50 men, not 100, thousands. And they won't stop until every man, woman, and child in this valley is dead. Silence fell over the council. The truth of Sam's words hung in the air like smoke. Then what do you propose? Walks in Morning's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. We cannot simply release him. No, we can't. Sam looked around the circle, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. But we can send him back to face his own people's justice. The ranchers who came today, the newspaper woman who wrote down his confession, they'll make sure the story spreads. Whitmore won't be able to buy his way out of this one, not when half the territory knows what he's done. White man's justice. Crow Feather spat the words like poison. White man's justice has never protected our people. Why should we trust it now? Because this time you won't be alone. Sam's voice was steady. I'll go with him. I'll testify at his trial. I'll make sure the world knows exactly what kind of monster he is. And if they don't believe you, they will. I was a U.S. Marshal for 15 years. I know how their system works. I know who to talk to, what evidence to present. Sam paused. And I know where the bodies are buried. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. Walks in Mourning studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to her granddaughter. Winter Moon, you have been silent. What do you say? Winter Moon had been sitting at the edge of the circle, her face unreadable. At her grandmother's words, she stood and walked to the center where everyone could see her. 2 years ago, I watched Whitmore's men drag my sister from our lodge. I heard her screaming as they took her away. I found her body 3 days later in a ravine, broken and discarded like garbage. Her voice didn't waver. Her eyes didn't weep. But Sam could see the effort it took to hold herself together. For 2 years, I have dreamed of putting an arrow through Whitmore's heart, of watching him suffer the way my sister suffered, of taking from him everything he took from us. She paused, looking at the bound figure at the edge of the camp. But my mother taught me something before she died. She said that revenge is a fire that burns the one who carries it, that hatred consumes the hater more than the hated. Winter Moon turned to face the council. If we kill Whitmore, we become prisoners of our own rage. We spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, waiting for the army to come, waiting for the next Whitmore to rise. But if we let him face his own people's justice, if we show the world that we are not the savages he claimed we are, we take away his power. We take away everything he used to justify his crimes. And if their justice fails, Crowfeather demanded, if he walks free, then I will find him. Winter Moon's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. And I will end him myself, but not before, not until every other path has been tried. The council fell silent. Sam watched the faces around him, seeing the conflict playing out in each one. The desire for vengeance warred with the wisdom of restraint. Finally, Walks in Mourning spoke. We will vote. All who favor sending Whitmore to face white man's justice, raise your hand. Hands went up around the circle. Not all of them. Not even most of them at first. But as the seconds passed, more followed until a clear majority had declared itself. Crowfeather was not among them. But when the old woman called for those who opposed, he kept his hand down. It is decided. Walks in Mourning's voice carried the finality of law. Whitmore will be taken to Laramie to face trial. Samuel Thornton will accompany him and speak for our people. She looked at Sam, and something passed between them that he couldn't quite name. Do not fail us. I won't. The council dispersed, but the tension in the camp remained. Sam found himself standing alone near the central fire, watching the flames dance, thinking about everything that lay ahead. You're doing that thing again. Winter Moon appeared beside him, her footsteps silent on the packed earth. What thing? Thinking too loud. She sat down on the log next to him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. My grandmother says you have the face of a man carrying the world on his back. Your grandmother sees a lot. She's had 70 winters to practice. Winter Moon was quiet for a moment. You don't have to do this, you know. Go to Laramie. Testify. Yes, I do. Why? You've already risked everything for us. You've already proven yourself. No one would blame you if you stayed here, if you let someone else carry this burden. Sam looked at her, at the firelight dancing in her amber eyes, at the strength and vulnerability that lived side by side in her face. Because I need to see it through. Because if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I did enough. He paused. And because I made a promise to your grandmother. She didn't ask for a promise. No, but I gave one anyway. Winter Moon studied him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, the same gesture she'd made after the battle. How long will you be gone? A few weeks probably. Maybe longer if the trial drags on. And after will you come back? The question hung in the air between them. Sam knew what she was really asking. Not just whether he would return to the valley, but whether he would return to her. Winter Moon, I don't. She held up her free hand. Don't make promises you might not be able to keep. Just tell me the truth. Sam took a deep breath. The truth. Such a simple thing, and yet so terrifying. The truth is, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if the trial will go the way I hope, or if Whitmore's friends will find a way to silence me. I don't know if I'll make it back to this valley, or if I'll die somewhere on the road. He tightened his grip on her hand. But I know one thing for certain. If I survive, if I make it through whatever comes next, there's nowhere else I'd rather be than here. With you. With your people. Wintermoon's breath caught. For a moment, she just looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. She found none. That's a dangerous thing to say, Samuel Thornton. I know. If you mean it, you'll be taking on a life most white men would run from. A life of hardship, of struggle, of being caught between two worlds that don't want you. I've been running from life for 3 years. I'm tired of running. Something shifted in Wintermoon's expression. The walls she kept around her heart, the defenses she'd built to survive, seemed to crack just a little. My grandmother was right about you. About being foolish. About having a good heart. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture so intimate that Sam felt his breath catch. Come back to me, Samuel. Promise me you'll try. I promise. They stayed like that for a long moment, forehead to forehead breath mingling in the cool night air. Sam felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Connection. The sense that he wasn't alone anymore. When they finally pulled apart, Wintermoon's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I have something for you. She reached into her dress and pulled out a leather cord with a small carved stone hanging from it. The stone was blue-green, polished smooth by years of handling. This was my mother's. She gave it to me the night before she died. She said it would protect the person who wore it. I can't take this. You can, and you will. She pressed it into his hand. Consider it a loan. You'll have to come back to return it. Sam looked at the stone, then at Wintermoon. His throat felt tight. I'll guard it with my life. Guard yourself with your life. The stone is just a stone. Despite everything, Sam laughed. It felt strange, rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. You're remarkable, you know that. So people keep telling me. But she was smiling, a real smile that transformed her entire face. Now go get some sleep. You leave at dawn. Sam stood still, holding the stone in his hand. He wanted to say something more, something that would capture everything he was feeling. But the words wouldn't come, so instead, he simply nodded, tucked the stone inside his shirt, and walked toward his lodge. Behind him, Wintermoon watched him go, her heart fuller than it had been in years. The journey to Laramie took 5 days. Sam rode with Running Elk and 2 other warriors, Whitmore bound and gagged in the back of a wagon they'd borrowed from one of the ranchers. The judge had stopped talking after the first day, when it became clear that no one was listening, but his eyes never stopped calculating. He's planning something, Running Elk said on the 3rd night as they made camp beside a narrow stream. I can see it in his face. He's always planning something. It's what men like him do. Should we be worried? Sam looked at the wagon where Whitmore sat, his pale eyes reflecting the firelight. We should always be worried, but we shouldn't let it stop us. Running Elk nodded slowly. He'd been different since the battle, more respectful, less hostile. Not quite friendly, but no longer openly suspicious. Wintermoon told me what you said to her, about coming back. She did. She tells me everything. We're twins. Sam blinked. Twins? You don't look anything alike. She takes after our mother. I take after our father. Running Elk's voice softened. We were born in the same hour during a thunderstorm. Our father said it was a sign that we would always be connected no matter how far apart we traveled. That's a beautiful belief. It's not just a belief. It's truth. Running Elk looked at Sam, his expression serious. If you hurt her, I'll know. Even if you're 1,000 miles away, I'll know. And I'll find you. I believe you. Good. The young warrior stood and stretched. Get some sleep. We'll reach Laramie tomorrow. The next morning they crested the final ridge and saw the town spread out below them. Laramie was bigger than Sam remembered. New buildings had gone up since his last visit, new streets carved out of the prairie. The railroad station at the edge of town was bustling with activity, and the sound of hammers and saws echoed from half a dozen construction sites. Progress, some would call it. Sam wasn't so sure. We should go straight to the sheriff's office, he said. The sooner we hand Whitmore over, the sooner this becomes their problem. Running Elk nodded, but his eyes were scanning the town with obvious distrust. There are many white people here. There are. But not all of them are enemies. How do you know which ones are? I don't. Not always. But I've learned to watch and wait to let people show me who they really are. They rode into town, slowly drawing stares from everyone they passed. A white man in rancher's clothes, 3 Apache warriors in war paint, and a wagon carrying a bound prisoner. It wasn't the kind of procession Laramie saw every day. The sheriff's office was a squat building near the center of town. Its windows barred its door, reinforced with iron bands. Sam dismounted and tied his horse to the post outside. Wait here, I'll talk to them first. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The sheriff was a man Sam didn't recognize, younger than him, with a thick mustache and suspicious eyes. He looked up from his desk as Sam entered. Help you? I hope so. My name is Samuel Thornton. I'm a former U.S. Marshal. Former? I resigned 3 years ago, but I still have friends in the service. Sam gestured toward the door. I've got a prisoner outside, Judge Cornelius Whitmore. He's wanted for murder, corruption, and conspiracy. The sheriff's eyebrows shot up. Judge Whitmore, the federal judge. The same. Mister, I don't know what kind of joke you're trying to pull, but it's not a joke. Sam reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is an affidavit signed by Elizabeth Warren of the Laramie Gazette, describing crimes she witnessed Whitmore confess to. There are also statements from a dozen ranchers who heard the same confession. The sheriff took the paper and scanned it, his face growing paler with each line. Good Lord. I need you to take him into custody. Hold him until federal marshals can transport him to Washington for trial. Washington. You want me to hold a federal judge for trial in Washington? That's exactly what I want. The sheriff looked at Sam, then at the paper in his hand, then back at Sam. His expression was somewhere between disbelief and terror. This is going to cause a lot of trouble. I know, but it's the right thing to do. For a long moment the sheriff said nothing. Then he sighed and stood up. All right, bring him in. But if this goes wrong, I'm blaming you. Fair enough. Sam went back outside and signaled to Running Elk. Together they hauled Whitmore out of the wagon and dragged him into the sheriff's office. The judge had finally found his voice. This is outrageous, he snarled as they shoved him into a cell. I'm a federal judge. You can't treat me like a common criminal. You are a common criminal, Sam replied. The only difference is you've been hiding behind a robe. You'll pay for this, Thornton. You and your savage friends. I have connections. I have power. The cell door slammed shut, cutting off his words. Sam looked at him through the bars at the man who had caused so much suffering, who had destroyed so many lives. Your power is gone, Cornelius. Your connections won't save you. The only thing you have left is whatever mercy the court decides to show. Mercy. Whitmore spat the word. I don't need mercy. I need justice. That's exactly what you're going to get. Sam turned and walked out of the office, leaving Whitmore's curses echoing behind him. The trial took 3 weeks. Sam testified for 2 days, laying out everything he knew about Whitmore's crimes. The newspaper stories had done their work. By the time he finished, the entire territory was talking about the corrupt judge who had murdered Apache families for their land. Whitmore's lawyers tried to discredit him, calling him a traitor, a savage lover, a man who had abandoned his oath. But the evidence was too strong, the witnesses too numerous. Even the judge's allies in Washington couldn't save him. On the final day of the trial, Whitmore was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison to be served in a federal penitentiary far from Wyoming. As the verdict was read, Sam watched Whitmore's face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something small and broken. "This isn't over," Whitmore said as the guards led him away. "Someday someone will finish what I started. The Apache will be wiped from this land, and no one will remember they ever existed." Sam stepped forward close enough that only Whitmore could hear him. "You're wrong. They'll be remembered. And so will you as the man who tried to destroy them and failed." Whitmore's eyes burned with hatred, but he said nothing more. The guards dragged him away, and Sam watched until he disappeared from sight. It was over. Running Elk found him outside the courthouse, leaning against a post, staring at nothing. "The white man's justice worked," the young warrior said. There was surprise in his voice, and something that might have been respect. "This time. Will it work next time? I don't know, but we'll fight that battle when it comes." Running Elk nodded slowly. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and clasped Sam's forearm in the way warriors greeted each other. "You kept your word. You fought for our people when you didn't have to." His grip tightened. "You are no longer a stranger to us, Samuel Thornton. You are brother." Sam felt his throat tighten. "I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing. Words are not always necessary." Running Elk released his arm and smiled a rare expression on his usually stern face. "Now come. My sister is waiting, and she is not a patient woman." Despite everything, Sam laughed. They rode out of Laramie the next morning, leaving behind the town and its noise and its endless complications. The journey back to the valley took 4 days, and with each mile, Sam felt the weight on his shoulders growing lighter. When they crested the final ridge and saw the camp spread out below them, his heart began to pound. Winter Moon was waiting at the edge of the valley, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. She watched them descend, saying nothing, giving nothing away. Sam dismounted and walked toward her, suddenly unsure of himself. What if she'd changed her mind? What if the weeks apart had made her realize he wasn't worth the trouble? He stopped a few feet away from her. "I came back. I see that. I brought your stone." He reached into his shirt and pulled out the carved turquoise still hanging from its leather cord. "I promised I'd return it." Winter Moon looked at the stone, then at him. Her expression didn't change. "Keep it." "What?" "Keep it." She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "You'll need its protection. You're going to be living in a world that doesn't want you remember, a life of hardship and struggle." Sam felt hope flaring in his chest. "You still want me to stay?" "I never didn't want you to stay." Her voice softened, and for the first time, he saw the emotion she'd been hiding. "I was just afraid you wouldn't come back, that you'd get to Laramie and remember what you used to be and decide that was easier than becoming something new." "I don't want to be what I used to be." Sam reached out and took her hand. "I want to be here, with you, with your people. Our people." Winter Moon squeezed his fingers. "If you're staying, they're your people too." "Our people." Sam tested the words, feeling their weight. "I like the sound of that." Winter Moon smiled a real smile that lit up her entire face. Then she did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't the brief press of lips to cheek she'd given him before the battle. This was something more. Something that spoke of futures and possibilities and two broken people finding wholeness in each other. When they finally pulled apart, Winter Moon's eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. "Welcome home, Samuel Thornton." Sam looked at the valley spread out below them, at the lodges and the cook fires and the people who had become his family. It's good to be home. The weeks that followed were the most peaceful Sam had known in years. He woke each morning to the sounds of the valley coming alive, to children laughing and women singing and warriors practicing their skills at the edge of camp. He worked alongside the men, learning to build lodges and tan hides and read the land the way the Apache had done for generations. And each evening he sat beside Winter Moon, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of fire. But peace, he was learning, was not the same as healing. "You're doing it again." Winter Moon's voice pulled him from his thoughts. They were sitting on a ridge above the camp, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Doing what?" "Disappearing." She reached over and touched his hand. "Your body is here, but your mind is somewhere else. Where do you go?" Sam was quiet for a moment. The truth was complicated, tangled up with grief and guilt, and memories he couldn't quite let go of. "I was thinking about Margaret." He felt Winter Moon's hand tense slightly, then relax. "Tell me about her." "You want to hear about my dead wife?" "I want to hear about the woman you loved." Winter Moon's voice was gentle, without jealousy or resentment. "She's part of who you are. I can't know you fully until I know her." Sam closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. "She was stubborn. Stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery. When I told her I wanted to marry her, she laughed in my face, said she'd rather marry a rattlesnake." "What changed her mind?" "I spent 6 months proving I wasn't a rattlesnake. Brought her flowers, fixed her father's fence, sat through Sunday dinners with her mother glaring at me like I was the devil himself." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "On the 7th month she kissed me behind the church and said she supposed I'd do." Winter Moon laughed softly. "She sounds formidable." She was. But she was also kind. Kinder than anyone I'd ever met. She used to leave food on the porch for travelers, even when we barely had enough for ourselves. She taught the ranch hands' children to read. She once nursed a wounded Apache man back to health, even though the sheriff told her she'd be arrested for aiding an enemy. "Did she know you would be sitting here one day, with another woman?" Sam opened his eyes and looked at Winter Moon. Her face was open, curious, without a trace of accusation. "No, but I think she would have understood." He paused, searching for the right words. "Margaret believed that love wasn't something you could use up. She said the more you gave, the more you had. When she died, I thought she was wrong. I thought my heart had been emptied and could never be filled again. And now? Now I think she was right." Sam turned his hand over and laced his fingers with Winter Moon's. "Loving you doesn't mean I stopped loving her. It means I found room for both." Winter Moon was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed his hand. "I used to be jealous of the dead. My husband, my parents, my sister. They had you before I did. They shaped you into the man you are." She looked at him, her amber eyes soft in the fading light. "But now I understand. They didn't take anything from me. They gave you to me. The grief you carry, the love you lost, it's all part of who you are. And I wouldn't change any of it." Sam felt something shift in his chest. A loosening, a release. For 3 years he'd been carrying his grief like a stone around his neck, afraid to let it go because letting go meant forgetting. But Winter Moon was teaching him that letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant making room for something new. "My grandmother wants to see you." The words broke the moment, but gently. Winter Moon stood and brushed the dust from her dress. "Now." She said, "It's important." Winter Moon smiled, a hint of mischief in her expression. "She's been asking about you all week. I think she's planning something." "That sounds ominous." "With my grandmother, everything is ominous. Come." They walked back to the camp together, their hands still linked. Sam had noticed that the stares had changed over the past weeks. Where once the people had watched him with suspicion, now they nodded in greeting, smiled at his attempts to speak. Their language laughed at his fumbling efforts to master their skills. He was no longer an outsider. He was becoming one of them. Walks in Morning was waiting in her lodge, seated beside a small fire. Her ancient face was as unreadable as ever, but there was something in her eyes that made Sam's heart beat faster. "Sit," she commanded. Sam sat. "You have been with us for 1 moon cycle," the old woman said. "In that time, you have worked alongside our men, learned our ways, and treated our people with respect. I've tried. You have done more than try. You have succeeded." Walks in Mourning leaned forward, her eyes piercing. "But there is something you have not done. Something that must be done before you can truly be one of us." Sam glanced at Winter Moon, who was standing by the entrance. Her face gave nothing away. "What do I need to do?" "You need to let go of the dead." The words hit him like a physical blow. Sam felt his chest tighten, his breath coming faster. "I don't understand." "You carry your wife with you like a weight. You carry your son like a wound that never heals. This is natural. This is human. But it is also a chain that binds you to the past." Walks in Mourning's voice softened. "If you want to build a future with my granddaughter, you must first release what holds you back. I don't know how. That is why I am here." The old woman reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Tomorrow night you will come with me to the sacred spring, the place where our ancestors rest. There you will speak to your dead. You will tell them what you could not tell them in life, and then you will say goodbye." Sam felt tears burning in his eyes. He blinked them back, but they came anyway. "I'm not sure I can." "You can." Walks in Mourning reached out and placed her hand on his arm. "You have faced outlaws and judges and the hatred of men who wanted you dead. You can face this." "This is different." "Yes, it is harder." The old woman's grip tightened. "But you are not alone. My granddaughter will be with you. I will be with you. And if you let them, the spirits of your wife and son will be with you too." Sam looked at Winter Moon, who had moved closer during the conversation. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "Not for me. Not for anyone." "But I do." Sam's voice cracked. "You were right what you said on the ridge. I've been disappearing, going somewhere else. I can't keep doing that. Not if I want to be truly present. Not if I want to be the man you deserve." Winter Moon crossed the distance between them and knelt beside him. She took his face in her hands. "You are already the man I deserve. You have been since the moment you picked me up off your land and carried me into your house. Then let me become more." Sam covered her hands with his own. "Let me become the man I could be instead of the shadow I've been." The next night they made the journey to the sacred spring. It was a place Sam had never seen before, hidden deep in the mountains, accessible only through trails that no white man had ever walked. The moon was full, casting silver light over everything, and the air was thick with the scent of sage and cedar. Walks in Mourning led the way, her movements sure despite her age. Winter Moon walked beside Sam, her hand in his, her presence a steady anchor. When they reached the spring, Sam felt his breath catch. It was beautiful. The water bubbled up from deep underground, crystal clear and cold, surrounded by rocks worn smooth by centuries of flow. Beside the spring, carved into the stone, were symbols and images that told stories he couldn't read, but somehow understood. "This is where we come to speak to those who have gone before," Walks in Mourning said. "The water carries our words to the spirit world. They hear us here. They answer here." She handed Sam a small clay bowl. "Fill this with water from the spring. Then speak to your dead. Tell them what is in your heart. When you are finished, pour the water back into the spring. It will carry your words to them." Sam took the bowl with trembling hands. He walked to the edge of the spring and knelt, dipping the bowl into the cold water. For a long moment, he just stayed there, the water heavy in his hands, his heart heavier still. Then he began to speak. "Margaret." The name came out rough, broken. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Margaret, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if any of this is real, but I need to say some things I should have said before you left." The water shimmered in the moonlight, and Sam could almost see her face reflected in its surface. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I was out chasing outlaws when you needed me. I'm sorry I chose the badge over you time and time again until there was nothing left to choose." Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. "I know you told me it was okay. I know you said you understood. But I never believed you. I spent 3 years hating myself for not being there when you took your last breath, for not holding our son before he joined you." His voice broke completely, and for a moment he couldn't continue. He felt Wintermoon's hand on his shoulder warm and steady. "But I'm learning something now. Something I should have learned a long time ago." Sam took a shaky breath. "Loving you doesn't mean living in the past. Honoring you doesn't mean refusing to move forward. You wanted me to be happy, Margaret. You told me that every day we were together, and I've been spitting on that wish by drowning in my grief." He looked up at the stars, at the vast expanse of sky that seemed to stretch forever. "I've met someone. Her name is Wintermoon. She's stubborn and fierce and impossible just like you were. She makes me want to be better. She makes me remember what it feels like to be alive." Sam lifted the bowl, watching the water catch the moonlight. "I'm not saying goodbye to you. I'll never say goodbye. But I'm letting go of the pain. I'm letting go of the guilt. And I'm choosing to live again." He poured the water back into the spring, watching it disappear into the depths. "Take care of our son for me. Tell him his father loves him. And know that wherever I go, whatever I do, part of me will always be yours." The water stilled, and the spring fell silent. Sam stayed kneeling for a long time, feeling the tears dry on his face, feeling something inside him shift and settle. The weight he'd been carrying for 3 years, it wasn't gone completely. But it was lighter now, bearable. When he finally stood, Wintermoon was waiting. She didn't speak. She just opened her arms, and he walked into them, holding her tight, letting her warmth seep into the cold places that had been frozen for so long. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For waiting. For believing I could do this." "I always believed." She pulled back and looked at him, her amber eyes soft in the moonlight. "From the first moment I saw you, I knew you had the strength. You just needed someone to remind you." Waxen Morning appeared beside them, her ancient face creased with something that might have been approval. "It is done," she said. "The spirits have heard you. The dead are at peace." "And Sam?" Wintermoon asked. "Is he at peace?" The old woman studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, a rare and precious thing. "He is beginning to be." The journey back to camp took hours, but Sam barely noticed. He walked in a kind of daze, feeling lighter than he had in years, feeling like a man who had just woken from a long and terrible dream. When they reached the valley, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. And waiting at the edge of camp was Running Elk. "Brother," the young warrior's face was serious. "We need to talk." Sam felt his peaceful mood evaporate. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Something is—" Running Elk paused, searching for the right word. "Complicated." He led Sam to the central fire where a group of elders had gathered. They looked up as Sam approached, their faces unreadable. "Samuel Thornton," Waxen Morning said, having somehow arrived before them despite her age. "The council has been discussing your future among us." Sam's heart began to pound. And we have reached a decision." The old woman's voice carried the weight of ritual. "You have proven yourself a man of honor. You have fought for our people. You have testified against our enemies. You have shown that you are willing to sacrifice everything for those you love." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But there is one more thing you must do before you can truly be one of us." Sam braced himself. After the previous night, he felt ready for anything. "What is it?" Waxen Morning's eyes flickered to Wintermoon, who was standing at the edge of the circle. "You must ask my granddaughter to be your wife, properly. in front of the entire tribe. Sam blinked. Of all the things he'd expected, this was not one of them. Right now, he looked at Wintermoon, who was staring at her grandmother with a mixture of shock and something that might have been hope. I don't have a ring. We do not use rings. Walks in Morning's voice was dry. We use words. Speak them now, or do not speak them at all. Sam took a deep breath. This was not how he had imagined this moment. He had thought there would be time preparation, a chance to find the right words. But maybe that was the point. Maybe love wasn't about finding the perfect moment. Maybe it was about seizing the imperfect one. He walked to where Wintermoon stood, his legs trembling, his heart pounding. She watched him approach, her eyes wide, her breath coming fast. Wintermoon. Samuel. I'm not good at this. I've never been good at words. Margaret used to say I was better with a rifle than a sentence, and she was right. A ripple of laughter went through the watching crowd. But here's what I know. Sam took her hands in his. I know that when I found you bleeding on my land, something inside me woke up. Something I thought had died with my wife. I know that every moment I've spent with you has made me a better man. And I know that the only future I want is one with you in it. Wintermoon's eyes were shining with tears. So I'm asking you in front of your grandmother and your brother and everyone who matters, will you let me walk beside you? Will you let me learn your ways, share your burdens, and love you for as long as I have breath in my body? The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Wintermoon laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed across the valley. You foolish, stubborn, impossible man. She threw her arms around his neck. Of course I will. The crowd erupted in cheers. Running Elk was grinning like Sam had never seen him grin before. Even Crow Feather, who had never fully accepted Sam, looked grudgingly approving. And Walks in Mourning, the ancient woman who had seen so much and survived so much, allowed herself a single tear of happiness. The ceremony was held 3 days later. It was simple by white standards, but rich in meaning. Sam and Wintermoon stood before the sacred fire, their hands bound together with strips of leather, while Walks in Mourning spoke words of blessing in the old language. They exchanged no rings, but Wintermoon gave Sam a bracelet of woven horsehair, and he gave her a necklace he had made from stones gathered in the valley. The carving was clumsy, the result of amateur hands, but Wintermoon wore it like it was the most precious thing in the world. You're crying, she whispered as the ceremony ended. I never cry. You're crying right now. Sam touched his face and found it wet. Must be the smoke. There is no smoke. Then it must be love. Wintermoon laughed and kissed him, and the crowd cheered again, and for one perfect moment, everything was exactly as it should be. That night, they sat together on the ridge above the camp, watching the stars wheel overhead. What happens now? Sam asked. Now we live. Wintermoon leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. We build a home. We raise children. We grow old together. That sounds terrifying. It is, but it's the good kind of terrifying. She looked up at him. Are you ready? Sam thought about everything that had led him to this moment. The grief that had nearly destroyed him. The courage that had saved him. The woman who had given him a reason to keep fighting. I'm ready. Wintermoon smiled and closed her eyes, and Sam held her as the night deepened around them. In the end, the story of Samuel Thornton was not a story of loss, though loss had marked its beginning. It was not a story of vengeance, though vengeance had been offered and refused. It was not even a story of survival, though survival had required more strength than Sam had known he possessed. It was a story of love found in unlikely places, of healing that comes not from forgetting the past, but from embracing the future, of two broken people who discovered that together they could be whole. Sam had come to this land as a ghost, haunting the edges of a life he no longer wanted. He had found Wintermoon bleeding on his doorstep, holding onto a map that meant nothing to him and everything to her. He had chosen to fight, to sacrifice, to believe in something larger than himself, and in doing so he had found his way home. The valley would face challenges in the years to come. There would be new Whitmores, new threats, new battles to be fought. But Sam and Winter Moon would face them together side by side as partners and lovers and warriors. Because that was what love did. It didn't eliminate the darkness. It simply made it possible to walk through it without losing your way. My friends, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me through this journey. Samuel Thornton's story reminds us that no matter how broken we feel, no matter how much we've lost, there is always hope. There is always the chance for redemption, for love, for a second beginning. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that the best chapters of your life may still be ahead, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment telling me which part moved you most. Share it with someone who needs to hear that love can still find them no matter how far they've wandered. Until next time, remember this: the West was wild, but the hearts that tamed it were wilder still. And sometimes the greatest adventure is simply learning how to love again.